Welcome to the Monos Pod, episode 5, I believe, with Tino and Matt. What's up, Matt?
How's it going?
Been better, man. I just had an eye exam for the first time in my, I think, adult life, and didn't realize my pupils were going to be dilated and couldn't see, and wandering around Walmart and doing the old person thing, I guess. I need bifocals. Maybe next pod I'll have rocking some Clark Kent glasses. What's up with you?
Better than a colonoscopy. So
This is true. I can vouch for that too.
at least they put you out for the latter, though.
Oh man, what's going on in your world?
It's going well, going well. Getting more and more looking forward to baseball getting started.
About
Um,
spring training.
yes, and yeah. So, and then seeing all the content starting to move as well.
Mm-hmm. So
Yeah.
this episode, we are going to finish out our top 100 with 20 through 1. Um, Long awaited. I think this episode has been about 6 weeks in the making. uh, Between our talking too long and not getting through 50 and not realizing it was going to take so long, and our failed evening episode. That'll remain under lock and key. Uh, yeah, so we'll go 20 to 1 today, and then maybe if we have some time, we'll talk about a couple of risers and fallers off of our original lists. Why don't you start us off with let's go 20 through 16 for you.
Okay, so at 20, I have the shortstop for Arizona, Jordan Lawler. At 19, I have starting pitcher for Cleveland, Daniel Espino. This is one of the ones that's affected by injury. He'd be much higher. Mystery injury, right? Knee, shoulder. They're really not saying much beyond that. 18, I'm sure will be a topic of discussion, is Curtis Mead.
Who?
17 is Tristan Cassis, the first baseman for Red Sox. He did move up a little bit because Hosmer was dealt away, so he's pretty much has that position from the start. So there's some proximity things there.
Mm-hmm.
I probably would move this next player up, just in looking at the past week as far as what I've been doing. Marcelo Meyer I have at 16, shortstop for Boston.
Cool. Looks like we're in the same range for most of them. I have Casas at 18, Espino at 16, Lawler at 14, and Meyer at 12. Let's start with who was 20 again? Remind me.
Lawler.
So he's one that I might push down a little bit off of 14 when I do the list again and update it. What is it? Talk to me a little bit about Lawler and kind of what you see.
Yeah, so I think I'm not as high as others. Some other pods have him in the top 10. I like his athleticism. I think he is pushed up because out of the shortstops coming in, he's one of the better defensive shortstops, right? So that defensive talent will push him up a little bit. That's something that fantasy really doesn't consider. So that's why he would drop a little bit. His hitting power has been better in performance than what people thought when he was drafted.
Mm-hmm.
Why have him a little lower? His hard hit, I think, was at 226. His slug wasn't overly impressive, but it was over 500. It was 509. His contact rate was right at 70 and wasn't excellent. He does have a good eye. He does walk, and that's going to help his speed. But I'm just a little more wait and see. He struggled a little bit once he was moved to AA as well, and I like to see players, especially ones that are kind of on the threshold here of the top 10, to go through that AA test, unless they are kind of that elite type of talent, the elite of elites, like a Choria.
Mm-hmm. So he had 85 at bats in AA this year. He hit 212 with a 299 on base and a 652 OPS. That said, he's 20, and I think this is about as high as I'll go on a player with the amount of swing and miss that he has. I think his tools are pretty evident. They look like made 55 to 60 across the board, right? So you've got an athletic, fast, powerful shortstop who has the ability to take a walk, which all sounds great. But he had 115 strikeouts and 389 at bats last year between
Mhm.
rookie ball, A, high A, and double A. One reason for me to push him up slightly is I do think Arizona is going to accelerate his development and he's going to get opportunity quickly. I would consider him in the back end of redrafts as well. Just because they don't, they have Perdomo and Ahmed at shortstop currently. And if they surprisingly contend or they're in contention, I do think that we could see Lawler sooner rather than later. I think at his peak, if he solves the swing and miss, you're talking about a potential 30-30 guy.
Mhm.
He had 16 home runs last year in 100 games and he had 39 steals. And the speed is very evident. He's the type of player to me that you could see on a basketball court or on a football field, right? He's got that kind of athleticism. I don't love Arizona's player development system. And despite Corbin Carroll and Alec Thomas, I think that I don't hate it, but they're not one that I gravitate towards. So it is a wait and see for me. 14 I'm probably pretty much in the middle of where you see Lawler across the board for other folks. But I do think he's the shortstop, and as as long as he doesn't fall on his face in Double A this year, to me he's the shortstop maybe in September for Arizona, especially if they're in contention.
Mhm. Yeah, and
Who's
out of the
next?
top shortstop debate, like the Lawlers, we'll move Ellie out of it because that's not where he's probably going to end up. But the Lawlers, the Volpes, and the Myers, he's the most athletic
Mm-hmm.
uh, out of them. So um, there is that as well.
Who was 19 for you?
19 was Daniel Espino. I like him a
Mm.
lot. He's got the as good, if not better, stuff than some of the others that I have in the top 10 who are elites of elites, I think. He could be right there with them. The only caution for me is Cleveland's own caution in kind of holding the cards back as far as where he is. But I think if he is healthy, what else does he have to prove with his pitches? He could be up this year if he's healthy and
If
in redraft leagues.
he had 35 strike, he only pitched 18 in the third innings in Double A last year. He had 35 strikeouts and 4 walks, right? So 18 in the third innings, 9 hits, 4 walks, 35 strikeouts, 2.45 ERA, and a 0.71 WHIP.
Hmm.
Yeah, he was a low first round pick of the Guardians in 2019. Just huge fastball, very good command for a pitcher with that kind of stuff. Wipeout slider, but his curve and change are also um, I would say average to slightly above average pitches. So to me, if we had a clean bill of health and he pitched in Double A all of last year, he would have been my number one ranked pitcher in the minor leagues. I had him at number one early in the season last season, and the health obviously knocks him down a bit for me. But I think of all of the pitchers uh, above him on this list, he still has the highest ceiling for me. I love
Hmm.
Daniel Spino.
And there's the org factor there too, as far as what
Yes,
Cleveland does with pitchers.
absolutely,
But
absolutely.
his walk to K all throughout his short career has just been incredible, right? So
Mm-hmm.
the walk to K differences could be is I think at 30% overall in career, right? And his K rates always between 30 and 40%.
Mm-hmm.
His walks right around 10%. So
Mm-hmm.
yes, he's and most scouts have him at a 80 grade fastball.
Who's 18 for you?
18 is Curtis Mead,
Mm-hmm.
second baseman, third baseman, Tampa. He checks all the boxes for me when it comes to a hitter. His contact is close to elite. It's between 78 and 80%. in his career in the minors. His walk rate's over 11% consistently. He's a line drive hitter, but he has the athleticism to play with his launch as far as developing more power if that's where he wants to go, and that's where Tampa wants him to go. So I think he's a Ty France who could hit better and with better EV and better eye plate discipline, and probably not the same plate discipline as a Muncy, but I think he has a higher hit there too. Baseball America graded him at a 70 hit, 60 power. For me, I take that any day, especially if he's going to play second base. Now, the if is the big factor, right? How is Tampa going to use him? Where is he going to play? Is he going to end up at first base, DH? That would certainly lower his value and rank. But if he is going to be each year plugged in at second and third, that's a great player for fantasy in the next 5 years.
So I just looked up plate appearances for Tampa Bay hitters last year, and Randy Arozarena had 645 plate appearances. Yandy Diaz had 558. And then Taylor Walls, Harold Ramirez, and G-Man Choi were the only other ones over 400. I obviously bring it up because I just wonder if even if he is a 70 hit, 60 power, how much of a fantasy asset is he if he's not getting more than 400, 450 plate appearances, right?
Well, it goes with talent, right? So the top two there are very talented players, and they weren't even top 20 prospects at any point. Like sure. Randy was traded, was one of those typical Tampa snags from another team that they found. Same with Diaz out from Cleveland. But both Meade and Manzardo, who's going to come up a bit later, are kind of their homegrown products that I could see them going with. Okay. And there isn't much of a Meade versus righties. There is the expected downturn there, but not anything critical, right? He's still, I think, in the 270s, 280s right. VA versus righties. Same thing with Manzardo versus lefties. Manzardo, there's no significant caution in him versus lefties. So I could see Tampa shifting course on some of their top prospects that are coming up now.
I would have, if we were just ranking based on talent, right? And this wasn't dynasty rankings for fantasy baseball. If we're just looking at talent, I would agree with you that he's probably a top 30, I'd say top 30 prospect. But I can't, and I have Manzardo in my top 20. I can't, with a, kind of a clean conscience, rank Meade this high, even if he is a 70 hit. I just can't, because I don't think Tampa's going to give him the plate appearances that it takes to make him that kind of star. Whereas, you take like Gunnar Henderson in Baltimore, right? They're going to give him 600 plate appearances if he's healthy. That for a fact. Or, if Cam Collier were to come up in 2 years in Cincinnati, they're going to give him those plate appearances, provided he doesn't have a huge problem with lefties. That's just, organizationally speaking, Tampa has not done that historically, right? They just haven't given 600 plate appearances to a bunch of players, and I do think that's something that needs to be considered in the ranks. I don't think Meade is quite as talented as you do, but like I said, even if he was in a different organization, I would rank him higher. Who's 17 for you?
17 is Cassis. 6'4", 252, big first baseman. For the type of power potential, raw power he has a great eye. He hits the shit out of the ball. And he's well known for being able to adjust at the plate, right? If he taps into his raw power, his hit is not going to be significantly significantly hurt by that.
Mhm.
So I could see him as the first baseman of the future. I think Boston sees that as well, in moving on from Hosmer. Not that that's like a huge competition anymore, but
Mhm.
still, it shows confidence that they're willing to let a veteran go and to roll with Cassis.
Yeah, it's interesting because he's a huge guy, right? 6'4", 252. Um, but I do think that he is as much of a hitter as he is a slugger. And so I don't see 40 home run seasons from him or that potential, but I certainly see high 20s, low 30s, and a higher average than you would expect from a player like that. Um, I would have him, so I have him at 18. I think he would be a top 10 prospect for me if I saw 40 home run potential. I just don't. But a
Mhm.
player that is certainly a value and worth acquiring. He also is probably going to be, provided health, he'll get 600 plate appearances with Boston this year. I expect him to be the opening day first baseman. 16.
16 is somebody I would move up now. This list was done a couple weeks ago. Marcelo Meyer for Boston. Um, he's moving up not that this matters, but he has been moving up a lot of lists. Coming out in January. Some even are seeing that once a lot of these players graduate, he may be in the top 3 when it comes to players. Just as far as he has both the hard hit and contact. He still hasn't necessarily tapped into his power. Great eye, great discipline, 16% walk rate. And I think Boston did the right thing ultimately. I think Boston fans were getting impatient, but they know what they have in Meyer. They know he's going to be up soon. I think that's probably why he's moving up boards as well, because I think word is that they are going to move him through pretty quickly.
Mhm.
But to invest in Devers and let Bogey go, I think was a smart move. You
Mhm.
have your future shortstop in Meyer, and now you have Devers locked up for 11 years, right next to him at third base. And I think Meyer has, he has a similar traits as a Bogarts, right? He's not going to necessarily have that early speed that, I think that's the knock on him. People want speed at shortstop, but he has the reliability in defense. He has that consistency across the board. So yeah, I like him a lot. I think I would move him close to my top 10 next time we
Mhm.
go.
So I would ask you, so I was going to ask you about speed at shortstop from a roster construction perspective. Is that a, how much does that impact your ranking? Because Meyer, to me, by all accounts, looks like a 290, 25 to 30 home run hitter who, in the right position in a good Boston lineup, could be 100 runs, 30 home runs, 100 RBIs, and a 290 hitter at shortstop at his peak, right? I think that's what we're looking at. But I don't think he's a double digit steals player. Maybe when he's first comes up, he might get 10, 12 steals, but I think that's about his ceiling as far as his speed goes. How much does that impact you knowing that you have to find speed at the other positions because your shortstop doesn't provide it for you?
I think it matters to me because I want to sneak in steals, especially in the infield positions that that aren't necessarily going to produce kind of the elite power that you'll get at the corners, right?
Mhm.
Um, so for example, I wouldn't I would hesitate to moving along with some of the other boards that I see and putting him in the top 5. So
Mhm.
like I have Carroll, Volpe, Henderson, and Churio in my top 5, and Walker right after that. But the reason why Walker is 6th is just because he doesn't have that 5th category.
Sure.
Carroll, Volpe, Henderson, and Churio are all going to have that.
Mhm. I just pulled up my preliminary shortstop rankings for 23, and here are the list of double digit steals from 23 or from 22. Bobby Witt Jr. 30, Trey Turner 27, Lindor 16, Bichette 13, O'Neill Cruz 10, Tim Anderson 13, Swanson 18, Edmund 32, Ahmed Rosario 18, Pena 11, Stott 12, Nico Horner had 20, Andrus 18, Kim 12, Mateo 35, and Kiner Falefa 22, right? So I think what that says to me is for the most part at shortstop, you can find a really, really good hitter with double digit steals
Mm.
um, pretty readily. And it puts you, especially in Roto, it puts you behind the other teams a bit by having a player like that. That said, there aren't a lot of guys on that list with 30 home runs. There's not a lot of guys on that list with 100 runs or 100 RBIs. So I love him as a player. I think I like him slightly more as a real life player than a fantasy player just because of the lack of speed. But that doesn't mean he's not top 20 for me. For me, he's number 12 and on the ascent. And I have his ETA at 2024. The other thing about him is I don't think there's a lot of risk, right?
Mm.
He's got a really, really beautiful left-handed swing. There's a spot for him on waiting for him in Boston. Um, he comes from a big program in Southern California. I don't think the pressure of being in Boston is going to be anything to him. So I have him as a really low risk prospect as well, and I think that's part of for me why I have him at 12 is I think he's going to be an above average shortstop offensively, and he's got superstar potential.
Mhm.
Let's take a quick break and we'll come back with 11 through 15 or 11 through 15. I
Okay.
failed
Well,
to what's that?
oh, go ahead.
I failed to do my 16 through 20. Um, did you have Yuri Perez? You had Yuri Perez on the previous episode, right?
No, I have Yuri as number 8.
Okay, so we'll save him for 8. I've got Mason Wynn at 20. We talked about him a little bit, I think, last episode, or you mentioned he was on your list. I think he was in the 20s or 30s.
Mhm.
Mason Wynn, 20-year-old shortstop for the St. Louis Cardinals organization, mostly well known for his incredible arm at short. I think he threw 100 miles an hour across the diamond in the futures game, which was nuts.
Mhm.
Last year in high in Double A as a 20-year-old, 474 plate appearances. He had 12 home runs, 43 stolen bases, hit 283, 364, and a slug of 468. Uh, Super athletic, right? Obviously.
Mhm.
Reminds me a little bit of Rafael Furcal. He's not a switch hitter like Furcal, but Furcal had the same sort of explosiveness, both with his arm and with his bat. I think there's like 2020, 25 potential with Win. He had
He's
does
the
have
type of player that will benefit from the stolen base rules as well.
yes. He's got 100. He had 115 strikeouts in 474 at bats last year. There is swing and miss in his profile, but being a 20-year-old and being able to hold his own in Double A, I think bodes really well for him in the future. There's
Mhm.
very clearly a spot for him on that team. The reason why they didn't go after a big shortstop this year in free agency, I think he's their starting shortstop opening day in 24. Um, and he's a fun player, right? So he's the kind of player who is super exciting to watch. I do think he may even be a better fantasy player than a real life player of his because of his speed power. The one thing in our league is a little weird in that errors is a category. And I think with a shortstop like Win, I could see the type of range and arm that he has. I could see him taking some chances at short and making a few more errors than you might like. So that's something to consider in our particular league. But all in all, I love him as a shortstop prospect. I think um, he's almost like a cheaper Jordan Lawler, right? He's
Mhm.
got that speed power. Um,
High floor.
yeah, I may take Win over Lawler if I had to choose between the two, even though I have Lawler slightly ahead. The other one to discuss in my 16 through 20 is I have Kyle Manzardo at 17. First baseman, Tampa Bay Rays. We just talked about Rays players not getting at bats. I do think that corner bats for them and explosive corner bats for them, they'll find a way to get you plate appearances if that's who you are, right? So, player like G-Man Choi. I always want to say Hee-Seop Choi every single time. G-Man Choi, Yandy Diaz, right? Those are some of the guys that get plate appearances for them. And Cal Manzardo, I think, is a much better hitter than either of those two. Last year in high A and double A, he in 324 at bats, he had 22 home runs. He had a 426 on base percentage and a 1.043 OPS. I think you're looking at everyone's talking about Matt Mervis, right? And Matt Mervis has moved up a lot of boards. Manzardo's the better player. Manzardo's got a better bat. I think I have Manzardo one spot above Casas. I think he's a better hitter. Casas may prove out to have more power, but I like Manzardo a lot as a player. This is a huge 180 from our conversations early last year or middle of last year. Right. I've watched him and I think I love his swing. He is my top rated first baseman at 17. All right. See, I have Espino at 16. Again,
you're 15 to 11.
Okay.
Keep going.
So 15, I have Cam Collier, third baseman, Cincinnati Reds organization, was I believe, 17th pick or 18th pick in the draft last year, which he fell quite a bit. A lot of people had him in the top 5. Lou Collier's son, for anybody who followed baseball in the 90s, left-handed swing, not very fast, athletic, but not quick twitch athleticism. Incredible left-handed swing, right? Easy power, great hit tool. I have his hit tool at a 65. I actually have him 65 hit, 65 power. And I think as he matures a little bit, he's 6'2", 210 right now. I could see him getting up to 220. If he adds more muscle, that power could potentially be a 70. But he's still only, he is now 18 years old. He turned 18 on November 20th. He, as a 17-year-old, played junior college ball in Florida, held his own. This year in rookie ball, Cam Collier hit, of course, it's a small sample, but Cam Collier hit in rookie ball. He's only 27 at bats, but he had 2 home runs. He had 370, 514 with a 1.144 OPS. I love him.
His walks and Ks were pretty even too, right?
7 walks, 6 strikeouts. I love him, right? He was a player that I picked up as soon as I could. I roster him right now. He's probably not going to be in the majors until 2025 or 26. I don't care. I believe in his talent. I think we're looking at the middle of 23. We're looking at a top 10, maybe even a top 5 prospect. He's that kind of hitter.
I have a question for you in sure. relation to that and Marte, who we went over last time. So give me the infield and outfield of the 2025 Cincinnati Reds.
I think Collier probably ends up at first base, to be honest, unless Marte ends up in a corner in left or right field. But my guess would be Collier's at first. Arroyo is at short. Marte is at third. I'm going to say Matt McClain at second, unless they trade him. And then outfield wise, I've got Ellie in right field, and then the other 2 outfield spots I don't really have as much of an opinion about. They got Spencer Steer. I think Steer is more of a utility guy. I know people like Encarnacion Strand. I could also see a scenario where Marte is in left. Encarnacion Strand is at first and Collier's at third, right? But as far as Collier's bat is concerned, I think at first or third, he's going to be a huge asset. I think there's 335 home run potential in that bat. especially in that park.
Park factor there too. It's the number one hitting park now above Coors.
100%.
That's gonna be a great team to watch in 25.
I love
Even
the
with the
Mariners. I love what the Mariners have done. I love Julio more than anything, but that'd be a really fun team to be a fan of, I think, right now, Cincinnati Reds. The only thing is I feel bad for their pitchers, and I love following great pitching, and they're kind of screwed in that park. Uh 14, I have Jordan Lawler. I think when I redo this list, I'm probably gonna move Mason Wynn above him, but I still like I talked about before, I like the opportunity. 13 is Jackson Holiday, number one pick in the 22 draft. Matt Holiday's son, left-handed shortstop for Baltimore Orioles organization. Uh, nice player, right? Like kind of the things that I said about Marcelo Mayer are true about Jackson Holiday as well. Holiday has a little bit more speed and athleticism. Uh, he's, I think, more likely to remain at shortstop for 10 years, where I could see Mayer moving to third eventually because he's got a little slower, bigger body type. But there's not a whole lot to not like about Jackson Holiday. He's a damn good player. The only shortstop I have above him in my ranks, so I have Mayer one spot above, and then I've got Volpe in my top 10. Mostly because Volpe has more speed and proximity. But Holiday's a great player. It's one that he's a player I don't gravitate towards. I don't know why. I don't roster him anywhere, but he warrants top 20 status. You have anything to add with Holiday?
How many at bats did he have in rookie ball?
64.
Okay, because I have him at 81% contact and 28% walk rate. So
64 at bats, 25 walks, 12 Ks.
Wow.
Pretty nice.
Yes.
And his dad was a good hitter, right? And I don't want to buy into bloodlines too much, but that is worth something, right? He grew up in a baseball family. His dad was a great hitter. But pretty swing. I got Mayer at 12. We talked about him already. I think those two prospects are very similar to me. I think Mayer is maybe a slightly better hitter, but Holiday's got a little bit more speed. But pretty much same. And then at 11, I have Grayson Rodriguez, 22-year-old right-handed starting pitcher for the Baltimore Orioles organization. Pitched as high as AAA last year. I know he's your guy. You've done extensive research on Grayson. He's in your top 10, I assume?
Yes, he's my number one pitcher at number 6.
Got it. So let's talk a little bit about Grayson.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about him at length in prior pods. I think he has elements you're looking for as far as control and Ks, right? He's right up there, very elite with that. 31% strikeout rate, 8% walk rate has been lower in previous years. What is interesting about him is home runs. So he's under 1%. He's at 0.06, 0.6 percent rate when it comes to giving up home runs. He has the pitcher mentality. He has a buffet of pitches, at least four great pitches between 60 and 70 grade that he could work with. The caution there is injury, but that's going to come with any pitcher. I think there's proximity advantage with him as well. That's probably why I would up him a little bit. I think he has a shot to be the 5th starter in Baltimore at the start of the year.
I know there's a lot. So most people say his slider is plus. I don't know if I think it's above average. I don't know if it's plus. I think his fastball and changeup are his two best pitches for me, which is not necessarily for me an elite starter. I do think there's some level of risk that he's a middle of the rotation starter as opposed to an ace. I don't love the curve and the slider as much as others do. But he's got impressive stuff, right? Go ahead.
He has to be fair, and as we're talking about Baltimore hitters, especially righties, he does have that left field advantage in Baltimore too, which is helpful for pitchers.
Right. Uh, I think his health risk is less than Espino, which for explains the 5 spot difference on my end. But I think Espino has more potential than Rodriguez does. I'm not quite bought into him being as elite, I think, as other people think. I do think that provided health, he's 180 strikeout, 160 inning, 180 strikeout type of guy, which provides tremendous value, right? To me, if I had to bet, he's an SP2, SP3 in a 15 team fantasy league. Great pitcher, just not my favorite pitcher on this list. Your 11 through 15, do you have any players that we haven't covered yet?
Yes, there may be one who be maybe higher in your list. I dropped him a little bit. I have James Wood at 15.
Mm-hmm.
He hasn't passed double A test for me. My biggest caution there is it was a great trade for Nationals. I'm a Nats fan. I just don't see player development early on
Mm-hmm.
in the Nats. And I really don't I love Davey. I love him as a manager, but the way he's worked with his players, I just question it. Even with Abrams, at the end of the year, they were really helping him with contact.
Mm-hmm.
And the sense is, Davey wanted him to hit it on the ground more because of his speed.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. I see Abrams as a talented hitter. I'm not sure he's kind of that Ruiz who you kind of want to hit it on the ground because he doesn't have the high EV.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't have that hit tool. I just question the way they develop players. Robles, I think maybe his ceiling was exaggerated, but still, I think they busted him. They they really didn't develop an identity for him, right?
Mm-hmm.
He had that good first year, and then they wanted him to go all power 5 categories, and he blew it, right?
Yeah.
And his low EV was an indicator that he probably should have been developed in another way. So yeah, I don't fully trust the Nats. I would have Wood a lot higher if he wasn't traded, if he remained in the San Diego system,
Mm-hmm.
and he went through the San Diego system with those ballparks, right? He would be definitely a player I would want to roster and maybe trade as he hits the high minors and is in the Pacific Coast League and just killing it, right?
Sure.
So yeah, he's Wood is great eye, 14% walk rate, 75% contact rate, hard hits there. His slug is well over 500. Just everything you want in an outfielder. Will he remain in outfield at 6'7", 240? Is he going to be at first base? He seems to have the athleticism now, but depends on what the Nats do with him.
I had him as a first base prospect and had him at 22.
Okay,
Um,
you had him.
I have his risk as mid, and the reason why it's mid is not because of his height. It's because, as you said, it's the organization, right? Um, it made me think when you brought up Abrams. I I wonder if we start to see with the shift rules changing and hit our pitchers starting to figure out how to manipulate kind of high launch angle type of approach from hitters. If we start to see organizations teaching line drives again, hitting line drives again, and contact in the way that Tampa and Cleveland do, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a player like Abrams I think, is absolutely perfect for that. I know that he's got a lot of swing and miss, but if you teach a guy like that to hit line drives, he's going to pop 20 home runs naturally,
Mm-hmm.
right? But he's also going to hit for average, and he's going to be able to utilize his speed. And so going too extreme one way or the other for me is only for players who aren't capable of hitting line drives first.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, you've got to tailor your approach to each player, but I think we will head that way. And those are the types of players that I find myself um, gravitating towards now, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
not the high launch, um, kind of big pull hitter type of players. I think the Simeons of the world are going to start to go away a little bit
Mm-hmm.
because pitchers are able to manipulate it. And like I said, I think teams are looking for more well-rounded skill sets which is cool. I think that's the kind of development I want to see within the game is seeing more just ball players instead of really specialized skill sets.
Yeah, and I think Abrams, he's not a prospect anymore, but he's a wonderful buy low right now, even though I just sold him low because I have Witt at shortstop.
Mm-hmm.
I was envisioning Abrams at second base. He's a wonderful buy low right now.
Mm-hmm.
And plus he has the athleticism. He's always been high hit player. And he's only had, I think, like 350 at bats in the minors,
Mm-hmm.
right? So he was rushed in San Diego. And the Nats it had space for him, so might as well give him experience up there. So I only see him climbing quite high in the Nats as long as they don't mess with him too much.
Right. Well, and his defense is always going to keep him on the field, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he had in 19, he had 100 and looks like 165 plate appearances. And then in 21, 183 plate appearances. And then in 22, 186 plate appearances. And then up in the majors for 302. But yeah, one in the majors last year, 1.7% walk rate, but only a 16.6% K rate, right?
Yeah.
So he was just weak contact everywhere, basically.
And I think he improved that at the end of the year. He started to really hit it hard.
Mm-hmm. But interesting. It is. I think that I try not to buy too much into kind of a peanut butter approach because of an organization. I don't want to just say every prospect in the Nationals is now on the Nationals is now not worth anything because the organization is shit. Because I don't know that that's the case, but I do worry about the players that have the slow burn. Like a guy like Robert Hassel is going to be Robert Hassel, whether he plays for the Nats or the Padres, right? I just think his skill set is what he develops. I think James Wood falls into that category to a certain extent. But they also have Christian Vaquero, Brady House, and Elijah Green, who are raw, right? Brady House has 70 power, maybe even 80 power. And Elijah Green has skills across the board, but they're in the wrong organization for me, right? So I do think that applying kind of whatever that organizational thought is important, but it's also important to understand the player well enough to decide whether, and look at their skill set to decide whether they have that ability to overcome the organization that they're in. And for me, Hassel and Wood are the two in that organization that fit that bill. Anybody else from 11 down?
Well, here's your favorite Francisco Alvarez at 13. We talked plenty about him. I would keep him in my top 20. So just so you know, it's not propaganda. I did trade him, but I have Adley, so I was trying to get value from Alvarez right now. One that I think is high. This is because of proximity, and I like him a lot as a pitcher. Is Hunter Brown with Houston? I have him at 12. I have him grouped below two other pitchers that have similar metrics. And not talking stuff, just looking at numbers. So I have Tiedemann at 10. I have Harrison at 11 and Brown at 12.
112?
Hunter Brown.
Okay. So let's talk Hunter Brown. I've got him at 84.
He's developed later than others, right? In Houston, he had a phenomenal year in the minors and AAA in a hitting environment. Underscore that. 31% K rate, 10% walk rate. So 21% K walk difference there. He didn't give up home runs, 0.89% home runs, which I think is very key for Houston, especially with that short left field porch. Great stuff. His fastball is developing. It has good movement and spin. He was mentored by I think the best pitcher in the league, Justin Verlander. And yeah, so I just think he's a very high floor pitcher in a very good system that knows that isn't afraid to let pitchers be pitchers as long as
Sure.
Dusty Baker's there, right? So I think compared to Tampa, I think Forecaster had this stat in their new edition. I think they're 78% of Houston pitchers go beyond the fifth into the sixth, whereas Tampa is only at 53, right? So Houston is the highest as far as just letting starters be starters. So I think Org influences where he's at. I could see him starting the year as a fifth starter. He could be like Christian Javier, kind of that the Swiss Army knife pitcher this year for Houston. So he's not kind of the immediate investment in a starter, but I just like his stuff a lot, and the results he brings through it.
What's his, so if we're talking rankings, we obviously take into account proximity, we take into account floor. What's Hunter Brown's ceiling for you? Like, what if he is peak Hunter Brown, or 90% Hunter Brown at age 26? What are we looking at?
High floor, very high floor. SP2. I don't see him ever being an SP1, but
Okay.
the SP2, I would take a SP2 in Houston any day. As far as for me, an SP2 in Houston, as long as they keep going, is a top 40 SP in fantasy baseball easily.
Oh, I can't rank him that high. He's had command issues in the past. He walked 50 hitters, or he had 50 walks in 100 innings in 21. He's always had great strikeout stuff. He's had the 1 year in AAA last year of dominance. And when I look at his, what was that?
And briefly in the majors, too.
Yes. If I look at him, I want him to be 21 years old to rank him that high, not 24, right? I think I could see him developing into number 2 starter if he was 21 years old and he was dominating, and he dominated double or AAA last year. But
he's one of those pitchers for me that I up because of fantasy baseball that I wouldn't necessarily up in like a baseball
rankings
setting.
Sure. He's, like I said, I don't see the upside to rank him that high. I also see some reliever risk given his command issues in the previous years before 22. Could he be a dominant setup guy eventually? Probably. Would the likelihood of that for me is probably 35 to 40% that he's an 8th inning guy or a closer eventually, and not a starter. But that said, I think you made a good argument for him. Houston does do a great job with their pitchers, and he did dominate in a couple of starts last year. All right, 11. Who do you got?
11. That's where I have Kyle Harrison.
Okay.
And he's fringy as far as top 10.
Don't ever call Kyle Harrison fringy.
No, I meant as far as top 10. I'm gonna start calling him Fringy Harrison whenever we
exactly. I have him at 10. I rostered him all last year. You'll hear me stump for him quite a bit, but let's go there with Kyle.
And I have him on my dynasty league as well. So
sure.
So he was part of an Ellie trade. I thought I traded Ellie high. He was part of the trade that I got back. So he's at 36% K rate. Wonderful difference between K and strikes, 25%, right? 11% is a little high when it comes. I mean, did I say K and strikes, K and walks? 11% is high with walks, but I trust San Francisco here, and that did decrease. And so whenever I see that pattern, I like to see improvement as they move through. His home run rate was 3.2%, not a concern at all. I've seen other people bring that up, largely because San Francisco, right? Pac Bell. So I don't think being a fly ball pitcher is gonna hurt that much, especially there, and the weak contact that he causes is not gonna go gap to gap in that big outfield. So I like him a lot. I could see him as, I think I've mentioned this before. I kind of can see Philadelphia and San Francisco playing a game of chicken as far as who's going to bring up Painter and who's going to bring up Harrison first. I think Harrison probably has the edge there when it comes to proximity. But Philadelphia has that contending thing with their team, especially in the East, and
Right.
what do Painter and Harrison really have left to prove, right? So when I say fringy, I could easily move him into my top 10, especially in how he performs at the start of the year.
Sure. So he's 10 for me. Uh Man, I probably watched half of his starts last year live. Um Really impressive arm, kind of like we talked about the approach with why am I blanking? Uh Waldachuk. So Waldachuk, Tiedemann, Harrison, all left-handed starters, all throw mid-90s, all have a wipeout slider sweeper type of pitch. Um, Tiedemann has a bit of a two-seam action at times, or can throw a two-seam, so that he's a little different in that sense. But Harrison, man, so he's approach against right-handed hitters. It's mid to high 90s fastball with a little bit of tailing action, really nice shape, kind of up in the upper outside corner of the strike zone to right-handed hitters, and it kind of just keeps moving, right? And you see him whiff on that all the time. And then he's got that quintessential left-handed back foot slider that's almost unhittable. 186 strikeouts in 113 innings last year in high A and double A. He got to double A and he was the same Kyle Harrison as he was in high A. Like you said, big park in San Francisco, pitching organization that does wonders with basically shit talent. So you give them an elite arm, and I'm very interested to see what they do with him. They just got done with Carlos Rodon, who different pitch shape, but also a fastball slider guy. And he didn't throw a third pitch essentially last year and was dominant. So I don't know that we worry too much about Harrison's changeup until maybe later on in his career. But for me, he's coming up as a 30% strikeout guy immediately. The only question I have with him is command, right? So if his command isn't great, he's both walking a lot of guys and missing over the plate sometimes. So he's surrendering some home runs, and his whip may increase a little bit, right? So that's going to be the difference between Kyle Harrison being a number one and being a middle of the rotation high strikeout guy. But I see at this point, he's 21. He dominated double A. He's in a big park. He's in a good org. His floor for me is an SP3, both real life and in fantasy. So for me, he's in the top 10. He's my number 10 ranked prospect. I love him. I absolutely love him. And he's really fun pitcher to watch.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is he's was a very, very good pitcher with more of a two-seam action, kind of sinking action on his fastball when he was drafted, and almost immediately added velocity to his fastball. And that's what made him an elite prospect as opposed to the third round prospect that he was in when he's drafted in 2020. I can't wait to see him. I will probably, from a draft approach this year or a team construction approach fantasy wise, I'm not going to count on him as a back of the rotation starter, but I may pick a starter or two that is high risk, high reward, knowing that Harrison is on the way.
Yeah, and he's being drafted in redraft leagues like Fantrax. I think his average is maybe if he were in our keeper league, the hybrid league, he'd be drafted towards the middle end of the draft.
Interesting.
If we were a redraft, right?
Right.
So and he's one of those two that's fun to I saw a few games last year. It's fun to watch, not watch him, but just look at the batter reaction to him. And it's like pulling the football away in Peanuts, right?
Right.
hitters are fooled. Like there's some that Painter where hitters are just kind of frozen, but then you watch with Harrison and they're just kind of like dumbfounded, right?
He's got an explosive arm. He's, like I said, he's a lot of fun to watch. I can't wait to watch his starts in San Francisco. All right, we're gonna take a quick break. We'll be right back, and we'll kind of rifle through our top 10. All right, we're going 10 through 6. Let's start with you.
Okay, let me pull the list back up here. Some of these we've already discussed. So I have Tiedemann at 10, pitcher for Toronto. This is one that I moved up because there was they did an experts mock draft of prospects, and just if I went off numbers and erased names of the metrics I'm using for my list, this one would appear as a top hitter. So we've already discussed him, Kyle Manzardo. He was kind of the person in the draft league, in the draft mock of experts. I think chose him 7th. He was kind of laughed at. They thought Manzardo would probably be 10 to 15, and he chose him ahead of Chorio, which I certainly would not agree with, right? But I think he was just trying to make a statement. But I have Manzardo at 9. Just one thing, as far as what if I erased his name, with 80 contacts, 80% contact, 12% walk rate, 34% high hard hits, and then 619 slug. But just erase the name, that would jump out, especially not, as somebody who is younger. He's not like a 25, 26-year-old in the minors. So
Not Hunter
and then I have Yuri Perez at 8. I go back and forth with him just because of his shoulder fatigue at the end of last year, and how he was being hit at the end of last year. But just looking at his ceiling with his repeatable delivery, 6'8", 6'9", 190, smooth delivery. Miami knows what they're doing with pitchers. I have him at 8. He's been as low as like 15 for me. He's been going between those areas. And then 7, I have Andrew Painter. And then 6, I have Grayson Rodriguez. I think I would put Painter, if I was not looking at proximity, I would put Painter as my number 1 starting pitcher.
So you think he's further away than Grayson?
I see Grayson starting the year in Baltimore. I could see Painter up in May, June. Unless Philadelphia wants to roll the dice.
There's been talk of pushing him.
What does he have to prove, right? For like 4% walk rate, 34% K rate,
right?
1% home run rate. I think they may want to, spring training will say a lot. What does he look like there against better hitting? And I think that will be the test there. But I think as far as the best pitcher, I think when we look at floor and ceiling, he would be the best pitcher.
So you have Tiedemann above Harrison. They're obviously neighbors, but what is it about Tiedemann that you see that you like more than Harrison?
I have them back to back, right next to each other. It's interesting to look like, so K rate Tiedemann 35%, K rate Harrison 36%. Difference between Ks and walk percentage 25% for both. 9.8%, 10% walk rate with Tiedemann, 11% walk rate with Harrison. I would be open to moving Harrison up just because of the park factor. What Tiedemann has going for him in that park is he's generates a lot of ground balls. He's 1% home run rate. That's going to work very well in Toronto. Proximity, Harrison has that over Tiedemann. I don't see Toronto having a need to rush him this year. So I see them both as very similar as far as stuff goes. I like Harrison's stuff better as far as long term, but I do like Tiedemann a lot.
So you're going to be watching those ground balls just get past Bo Bichette at shortstop from Tiedemann. I like Tiedemann too. I was on him early last year, drafted or picked him up. He is 34 for me. I don't like that park. And he was a bit, not a pop-up, obviously, but he was a bit of a fast riser last year, and I want to give it a little bit more time before I really jump on that. I have Painter at 6. He is my number one starting pitching prospect. I think he's kind of like a better version of Grayson Rodriguez to me, in that, he really has a legit, 3 to 4 pitches, right, that are all plus or double plus. He's got great extension on his fastball. He's got very, very good command at this point for a 19-year-old who's 6'7", which I think is always a great sign. He's almost a better version of, he's not quite the command of George Kirby, but in my mind, that type of, like, just a pitcher with great stuff who you can't really poke too many holes in. For me, pitchers only have a certain number of bullets in their arm. And if he's pitching the way that he did last year, even though he's 19 years old, I want him up as soon as possible. At the least,
he has the fundamentals too that are incredible. It's very repeatable motion, and that's why he's frankly quite ahead of Perez here. Both of them are big bodies, but Perez has a little more kinks in his delivery, and it showed his shoulder.
The issue that I have with Perez is, I have him at 19. I may push him down a bit more, but he's a fastball, curveball, changeup guy. And that mix is, and for me, in this day and age, without a slider, it's hard to really, it's hard to dominate, right? Without fastball slider right now. And, I think Perez's changeup is very, very much is elite. And I don't want to take that away from him, but I think Painter is a lot safer of a prospect for me because of his pitch mix and because of his command versus someone like Yuri Perez.
And durability for me,
yes,
with Painter versus Perez.
Yes. So 10 through 6 for me. Harrison at 10. I have Gunnar Henderson at 9. We can talk about him in a minute. Jackson Churio at 8. I assume those two are in your top 5. Painter at 6. We just talked about him. The one to talk about on this part of my list is Termarr Johnson is my number 7 overall dynasty prospect. 18-year-old, number 2 pick in the draft in 2022 out of Georgia. Pittsburgh Pirates organization. He played shortstop as a prep. He is a second baseman to his core as a pro. Currently listed 5'8", 190. There was talk of him having the best hit tool as a prep that anyone's seen. And what do they call him? They called him a Wade Boggs 2.0, something like that. Watched a lot of tape of him in the cage. Man, to me, he's, I don't know. I'm going to gush because I just love him as a prospect, but I don't know if I put 80 hit tool, but I put 70, and I think that's being conservative.
I think some had him at 80, right?
Some folks did. Pipeline has him 70 hit, 60 power. I think we're looking at a perennial 300 hitter with 25 home runs at second base. And I think he is a number 2 or number 3 hitter in Pittsburgh lineup for a long time.
And benefits from the shift rule.
Yes, very much so. So if anything with Termarr, his fantasy stock, I think he's a surefire. I know he's 18. I know he's only played in rookie and A-ball. For me, he's a surefire above average offensive second baseman. And I think that there is a lot of potential for him to be a superstar. The only thing that's going to keep him from the superstar numbers will be if Pittsburgh continues to not develop offense. Then you're looking at a 75 run, 75 RBI guy instead of 100 runs and 100 RBIs. The other knock on him, which I think is legit, is he's not very fast. I think that if he gets to double-digit steals, we're lucky. I also, by all accounts, he is the type of player who may have 45 or 50 speed, but could steal 10 to 12 bases because he's such a high IQ baseball player. He's a leader. He's high IQ. these things don't necessarily matter in fantasy statistics, but they do matter in terms of his ability to capitalize on his talent and the speed with which he moves through the organization. Um, I love him. I think people are silly to rank him as low as I've seen him. You know, he's kind of barely a top 50 prospect in a lot of lists. And I get it, he's 18, he was just drafted, but just watch his swing, right? Just watch his swing and read about a couple of scouts that talk about him, and they'll tell you that he was by far the most talented player in this year's draft. He just was a surefire second baseman, and that's why they couldn't take him at one.
Mm-hmm. So in a pure dynasty league, let's say you had the number one pick for a first year player draft, and you take away the position element, would he still be your number one?
And you're just looking at like statistical
and metric and
probability. Yeah. Oh yeah. I think he's a better hitter than Holiday. I think he's got a higher power potential than Holiday does. I think Holiday will steal more bags than him, obviously, in his career. But yes, I think that Tamar is a higher hit, higher power. The only other player that I think competes with Tamar that was drafted last year would be Elijah Green, but he's got too much swing and miss for me to take that risk. So yes, Tamar Johnson would be my number one. I think Jackson Holiday would probably be 2, and then Cam Collier would be 3 on my list. How about you? You haven't talked too much about Tamar. I know that you love him. I know that you've made you loving glances at Tamar Johnson on my team over the last year or so. What do you agree with my assessment? What parts of it?
Yes. And you moved ahead of me in the draft last year, and you took him in the 5th round. So yeah, he's I have the 3rd pick in my dynasty first year player draft, so I'm hoping he falls. Up it goes Holiday and Jones, and then he just falls into my hands at 3. But yeah, so he's the type of player I like, with the great contact, great eye, hits the crap out of the ball, consistent, especially if we do start applying fantasy stuff here, especially in head-to-head leagues, whether points or categories. That consistency is something you want as the core of your lineup, somebody you could count on 7 days a week, that isn't going to be volatile, do the Trevor Story thing and hit 8 home runs in 1 week and then suck for the rest of the year. He's that consistent second baseman that I would love. So I think he's somebody that, whether in a hybrid keeper league or in a dynasty, you just need to put him there and wait, because he'll be the number one. Most I think Pipeline already has him as the number one second baseman.
Really?
Yeah. So I think he'll be number one second baseman on most charts this year, I think.
Okay. I was just looking at my early second base ranks for overall fantasy in 2023. I've got Simeon at 1, Altuve at 2, Albies at 3, Jimenez 4, Chisholm 5. And then obviously Ketel Marte, Polanco, Story, Brandon Lau, Gleyber Torres. That's my top 10, right? But if I think about Tamar, even if I think about Tamar not quite being like a 320, 300 home or 30 home run type of hitter, which I think he could be, and I just see him as, like, say he's 290 with 25 home runs, he's still essentially the number one second baseman if he can give you 8 to 10 steals. And so, Simeon last year, 101 runs, 26 home runs, 83 RBIs, 25 steals. He had 248, the 733 OPS. Altuve, 103 runs, 28 homers, 57 RBIs, 18 steals, 300 average, 921 OPS, right? So there's some warts on each player. And if you consider Tamar Johnson's wart to be his lack of steals, but he's still going to give you something, he's a better player in each of the other categories than either of those top two second basemen. So part of the ranking for me, like we talked about last episode, is the fact that he's a second baseman. There's just not a lot of elite second basemen out there to have. And so if you can invest now and not have to pay a pretty penny for a player that is high floor, high ceiling, right? Low risk type of player who I think his floor is still like a top 5 second baseman. Like you should be jumping all over that. He may be higher than 7 in my next rank, especially if he starts off the season like I think he will. So I painter at 6. We're gonna move into our top 5. What is your list? Well, let's go back and forth. So who's your 5?
My 5 is Jordan Walker.
Okay.
Probably outfielder eventually for St. Louis, 6'5", 220.
I have him at 3. Yes, he's 6'5". I think he's 235, 240. Right-handed, just big power player. Not just power, he's got a pretty good hit tool, but big dude. He's listed 6'5", 220. I think he's closer to 6'5", 240 now. Came up as a third baseman, but I think pretty sure he's going to end up in right field. 20 years old, first round pick of the Cardinals in 2020. Last year he had 19 home runs in 461 at bats, 22 steals, 306, 388, 898 triple slash. So he's your number 5. He's my number 3.
Do you see him having the potential start of the year with St. Louis?
I do. I don't know. I think St. Louis is not afraid to play their best talent. He did strike out 116 times in 461 at bats, but if he's their best right fielder going into the season, I think he could be on the opening day roster and start in right field. So the knock on Walker is that even though he had 22 steals last year, he's not going to steal bases in the majors probably, right? He looks like your prototypical right-handed 35 to 40 home run hitter with a huge arm in right field.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and how many home runs did he hit last year?
19.
19. Okay, I have him at 508 slug. So he's kind of like Casas, that the power's there, but it really hasn't shown statistically yet.
Yeah, 31 doubles.
That's a concern. 31 doubles, yeah. So that's going to explain it as well. That's something that's gonna show something that can develop into home runs. Yeah. So and a shout out to Soul Kitchen here, because he got him in 2021 as a draft pick, and people in the league were saying, "Who is that? Why did he get him?" And now everybody knows who he is, right?
Do you think, what's the risk in Walker's profile for you?
I see him as oh geez, I'm looking at this right now. I don't see a lot of risk, to be honest. St. Louis helps solidify a high floor player. I see Walker, Volpe as being kind of the high floor players in my top 5, or the highest floor players. I know a lot of people have Gunnar as a high floor, but there's some question marks as far as contact with me. Right, Gunnar was 69% contact rate. Even with Walker's K's, he was still 75% contact rate. Gunnar has the eye, but I could see Walker certainly developing that better with his walk rate getting over 10%.
I think Walker's hit tool is underrated, and so I don't think he has that 230, 240 type of risk in him. But I do think his floor for home runs is somewhere between 25 and 30, and his ceiling is 40 plus, right? He's got 40 plus home run power or potential. So like I said, I think prototypical kind of powerful corner outfielder, big home run stats, big runs and RBIs. I don't think he's a 300 hitter, but if he pops a couple of 290 seasons, that won't surprise me. And then his speed will probably be best as a rookie or a second-year player and will be on the decline. But Jordan Walker's a badass, and I think warrants this top 5 ranking for me, especially when you compare him to some of the other corner outfielders that are just below him. There's no real comparison.
Mhm.
So five for we've already covered him. Five for me is Noelvi Marte. Um, I'll remain the high man on Marte. He's going to start the season in the Cincinnati Miners at third base, given their given Arroyo's arrival with Marte in that organization. You should share with the pod the observation you had of Marte in the AFL.
Oh, I just heard this from other podcasters who were there at the AFL that he sometimes seemed disinterested, and
Mhm.
it coincided with what you saw when you went and saw him play in Washington. That
Right.
he just kind of he has that sense that maybe I shouldn't be here,
Mhm.
right? And, I should be at higher levels, and I think he proved that in the minors last year at the end for the Reds.
Mhm.
So I could see him flying through. The very fact that they would put him at third at AFL says, hey, we're getting him ready to play faster than what others expect.
Right. I made the comparison to um, high school NBA potential NBA players, right? Who you have high schoolers who are immensely talented who get bored, and they're talented. Scouts will question their drive. Scouts will question their desire. And then they arrive in the NBA, and they were basically made to play in the NBA, not in high school. And they arrive in the NBA, and they're amazing. They're incredible players. And you ask the question, well, why'd this guy go 15th in the draft? And it was because now he's just blown up. And you ask the player, and he says, well, I was bored, or I was just ready to play in the pros. And I really do think Marte fits that bill, that he's just kind of cruising along, and he's ready to become a superstar in the major leagues. I think he's a better player than Gunnar. If I compare him to other third basemen, I think he's better than Gunnar. I think he has a more well-rounded skill set than Collier, but I'll say they're pretty much even. I think he's better than Marcelo. I think he's better than Holiday. I think he's much better than Lawler. Um, he's got more potential than Wynn. I just Let's go watch him play, right? I think he's one of those guys that people will get caught up in saying the same thing that others say and following, and you're not watching the tape on Marte. Watch his swing game in and game out, and you'll see a potential 30-20 guy at third base. I also think going from Seattle to Cincinnati is a godsend for him. He has more opportunity going to a worse team, and he's playing in the best hitters park in the major leagues. Um,
What where do you grade his speed?
55. I think he's got a 55. I think he can steal 20 bases as a young player. I do think if you look at his body type, I could see him filling out a little bit more, but he's got the skill and the instinct to steal double digit bags into his late 20s. And I do think he'll provide just enough speed to make him a non-zero at third, which is something that I look for. He's another player like Tamar for me. I think he's a superstar in the making, and I think a lot of people are sleeping on him. I've made more like double digit trade offers for Marte in our home league, and to no avail. Maybe I should just shut up about him and not say anything else.
Yes, I've
Uh
got Husky as well. He's been hanging on to his youth pretty consistently.
mhm.
He
Number
has he has
four.
he has Gunner as well, both
Mhm.
Gunner and Marte.
So you're number four.
My number four would be Chorio, Jackson Chorio
Mhm.
for wait, no, I moved that. Sorry. I've Gunnar Henderson at four. Um there's a lot to like in him. I think he does have a decent floor. There's not a lot of risk there. Um he does he has both good projected power, good projected speed. He could go 2020 as a third baseman. That's very valuable. His EVs have been very high, 35% high hard hit rate. I think the left field porch is not going to necessarily help him in Baltimore. That's a downgrade there. Um, Yeah, so where I think the other thing with these Baltimore players, besides Holiday, is where are they going to end up, right? Where's Henderson going to play this year? They don't seem committed to third. Is he going to play some short? You said you saw him even listed in some sites at second, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that would up his value there. I don't see long-term elites at third base. Some people project easily over 30 home runs. I don't see that in his makeup, and I don't see the elite hits either. He's at 69% contact rate, which it's on the threshold of not being very good, right? As far as looking
Yeah.
at them, right? The understatement of the podcast today. But 12% walk rate, he does have that eye to make up for it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I don't see. I question like hearing especially the January pods come out of the prospects, and the debate is between Henderson and Carroll.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't see that debate. I see a better debate between like a Volpe and Carroll, because one I think is high floor, one is high ceiling.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I have him at 4.
I have him at 9. I think you voiced pretty much all the concerns that I have. There's no doubt there's power and speed. Um, I don't think I think his hit tool is probably, above average to plus, but certainly not anything close to double plus. He's a good player, no doubt, but he to me is a consistently good player, but not Dever. I measure third base. So for me, he's the third baseman flat out, right? You've got Holiday on the way. They might try to hold on with Gunnar at short until Holiday arrives, but he's a third baseman. He's 6'1", 220. He's kind of too big to be or 6'2", 210. Too big to be a second baseman for me. So you put him at third, and the gold standard at third base is, we're talking about what? Machado, Devers, Riley. I'm missing one. Who am I missing? I can look 2 seconds. And Jose Ramirez, right? So that's and then Nolan Arenado. Those are that's the gold standard at third. Is Gunnar Henderson going to be that good? Is he going to hit 30, 35 home runs? Is he going to score 100 runs and have 100 RBIs, right? I don't think so. I don't think he's as good of a player as any of those guys. So for me, he's just a notch below, which is still very valuable, but is not the number one prospect as far as I'm concerned.
It's gonna be interesting how that lineup plays out too, right? So they have kind of these players, especially in the infield, that would be interesting number 2 hitters, but that's basically Adley's spot for the next 5-7 years. So where is he going to hit in that lineup? You got Mullins leading off, Adley second. Is he going to hit third once Holiday comes up? No, that's probably Holiday's spot, right?
I could see Adley hitting third. I don't think Adley's locked in at second. I don't worry too much. I worry about if there are anything other than in the top 4, and I think Gunnar will be there. If you ask the question, I think it's Kobe Mayo at first eventually, Norby at second, Holiday at short, and Gunnar at third, and Westberg maybe in a corner. He's a top 10 prospect. I'm not knocking him. He's my number 9, but I don't see the ceiling. The other thing is, he was good, not great until 2022. Everyone jumped on him in 22, and that's not a reason to completely cast him away, but you've got to ask some questions as to what it is about his approach that changed, right? To get him to be such a different player.
You don't necessarily see that evidence either, as far as was there a major change. And then it is interesting that kind of once Adley graduated, it was immediately Cowser as the one. And then he had that shift kind of mid-year. And in fact, the person in our league, Husky, he cut Cowser to pick up Henderson right when that happened. A brilliant move. But yeah, so other than performance, I don't think anybody's explained precisely what happened to him in his
approach.
Yeah, and how he's valued. I don't think he was Was he was at the end of top 100 lists at the start of last year,
He
right?
was. He was at the end of the list. He was kind of a middle top 10 prospect in the Orioles organization. In one more thing with him, he had a 59.8% ground ball rate with Baltimore when he came up. And he had a 50.3% ground ball rate in AAA. Now in AA, it was 40%, and it kind of was 40% in 21 and in 19 for him. But that's also something to keep an eye on is he able to elevate? His launch angle last year in Baltimore was 2 degrees.
Mhm.
And that is literally what has kept Brian Hayes from becoming a star is the inability to elevate the ball. So he's not quite as surefire, I think, as everyone is making him out to be.
Mhm.
All right. I have Noelvi at 5, Ellie De La Cruz at 4. We covered De La Cruz on a previous pod. He will certainly be lower than 4 for me when I do my next rankings. He may indeed be out of the top 10. But when I made this kind of about a month and a half ago, I had him at 4. The further I get away from his season and the more I think about the swing and miss, the more fearful I am. And that may change, but it's just my own kind of filter through which I see prospects. I just swing and miss scares the shit out of me. I have Walker at 3. We just talked about him. My number 2 is who's your 3 actually before I go to 2?
My 3 is Jackson Chourio.
Okay, we have not
And
talked
he's
about
moved up
Chourio.
a tad, and largely because of subjective bias reasons. Somebody made a trade offer, including Chourio. So I really haven't, to be honest, I really haven't looked into him in a deep dive. So the last couple of days I have. And then and so Baseball America has him at 60, 70, 70.
60 hits, 70 power, 70 speed.
Yeah, and then 70 with the defense, but that doesn't matter for fantasy baseball. It does matter for him moving through the system quite quickly, and a lot of people are talking about that, expecting him to move through, providing that defense in center field, very much like Harris did. I don't see Mitchell working out for them. I think they're depending a little bit too much on him. His ground ball rates, he really hasn't shown that he's improved that. I think he's a filler for just Chourio coming up. And I see him at the end of 23 coming up. He has elite EVs for 18-year-old, 35% hard hit, but even the EVs that are reported there are elite. He had a 544 slug. He did struggle once he did come up to AA, but again, you're talking about AA as an 18-year-old. His contact rate's over 70%. His walk rate's at 7-8% now, but I can see that improving. It's not like it's something awful, something that he can improve as he moves through. And then he has the advantage of the park in Milwaukee as well. So and their commitment to him. So yeah, I see him as a potential superstar. I think I love Ellie again, to go back to the last pod. I hope Ellie does well. One of my disappointments, I think he's going to be playing he's going to be playing in the WBC, right? So we won't be able to see him play for Cincinnati when we go to spring training, but I would have loved to see Ellie there. But Chourio, I think, is a safer floor when it comes to comparisons with Ellie. And he obviously doesn't have the size of Ellie, but he has that prototypical size of a center fielder at 6'1". He initially was listed 6'1", 165. I think he's a lot bigger than 165 now. But yeah, I like his speed, power, and hits all together.
What are we looking at as the same question as Chourio's like peak potential? What are we looking at?
I think 280, 30, 30.
So like Ronald Acuna comps?
Some have given those comps. I don't like giving comps just because they're somewhat limited. especially limited in the sense of the players who have already proven themselves. So I wouldn't jump that high to Acuna, but I do see him as that elite level, as maybe a step down from Acuna.
So the reason I like that comp a lot, they're not huge players, they're explosive, speed, power, talent. The one difference in my mind before looking it up was the walk rate, right? In the eye. Because Churio had 32 walks in 400 at bats last year.
Mm-hmm.
And Acuna has run in 19, 10.6% walk rate, 20 was 18.8%, 21 was 13.6, and then last year was 9.9, but he was hurt. But interestingly about Acuna is in 17, when he was in high A, double A, and triple A, it was between 6 and 7%, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so Acuna ran low walk rates as a young player, and his eye improved as he got older. And so I guess it's a word of caution for me to judge a player's ability to take walks, to not judge a player's ability to take walks as static when they're very, very young, and allow them to develop that eye, right? The other part of it is they always used to say you can't walk your way off the island. And so it's part of why they explain that there are the majority of players coming from the Caribbean are swing the bat all the time and don't take walks, right? Because hitting the ball hard is what gets you signed. And so the eye can develop over time once you teach them a different skill. I have Churio at 8 currently. I think he would probably be at 3 for me in the next ranking. I like him a lot. Now that I know that the door is slightly open to acquire him, I may try to knock that door down in our league, but I like Churio quite a bit. We've got 3 minutes left. Why don't we take a really quick break, come back and cover our top 2, which I believe are the same top 2. All right, last 2. On the count of 3, say your number 2 ranked dynasty prospects. 1, 2, 3.
Volpe.
Anthony Volpe. Okay, so we're the same. I essentially traded Tatis for Volpe at the end. So full disclosure, in our league at the trade deadline, I traded to Matt here Fernando Tatis Jr. for Anthony Volpe, Edward Cabrera, Robert Hassel III, and Marco Luciano.
And a couple of draft picks too.
Yes. So I've held on to Volpe and Cabrera, probably letting Hassel go. It's a hybrid keeper. I say that only to say that that's how highly I value Anthony Volpe in a dynasty format. I think real life, I don't know that he's quite as high. If he was a Mariner, he's a very, very good prospect. I don't know if he's an MVP candidate. If he can steal 35, 40 bases and hit 20 home runs for the Yankees, he's a pretty badass fantasy player. What say you about Anthony Volpe?
Yes, I still believe in him. And I think it's a good side note here that I think when trades are made, you're trading based upon value. So I don't think when I trade a player like Volpe, I'm disvaluing him when I trade him, right? Or I'm giving up on him. It's just I was looking for another position. So same with De La Cruz. I traded De La Cruz both in Dynasty and I traded him in our league last year. I still value him. I still think he has great value. I haven't given up on him, but I just got value back. So I wanted to note that as well. So Volpe is consistent across the board. He's that consistency I want in head to head. He's going to provide both above average speed and above average power, especially at shortstop. he's got a great eye. His walk percentage has always been well over 10%. His contact, even though people say he had a bad year last year as far as expectations go, he's close to 80% in contact. He's continued that. He gives quality contacts. His slug was a little down, but that is attributed to a slower start. It's also attributed, everybody forgets that AA Yankees is not the best hitting environment, right? So it was double shock for him as far as hitting environment, and then just getting adjusted to AA. But then he got adjusted. And then when he went to AAA, it was no problem, right? He raked in AAA. So I like him a lot. I know we have this debate. My one regret will be is if he does end up at second base, because I think he could be the number one second baseman very soon if that's the case, especially in that lineup. And just there is that. I know players could get exaggerated in the aura of New York or Boston, but I think players could also, their performance could be affected by that aura positively as well. So, I just see him as the Yankee shortstop, second baseman for the next 10 years, an easy high floor bet with some ceiling there as well.
And he's half Filipino. That was, and I have to admit, that was a motivator for me in trading for him. I also am half Filipino. The idea of a shortstop, whether he hits 250 or 280, the idea of a shortstop giving you 20 to 30 home runs and 20 to even 50 stolen bases is freaking ridiculous, right? It's ridiculous to imagine getting that kind of production at shortstop, right? We just talked about what's the difference between, so fantasy wise, right? You think about Volpe versus Marcelo Mayer. We talked about Mayer without speed. You could get 40 steals from Volpe and the same amount of home runs as you would get from Mayer. There's a huge difference for me in those two players when you're looking at them from a fantasy perspective. Also, it's a pretty good bet that if the Yankees are going to have a good offense, and that even if the offense sputters, the next year they're going to sign 3 players to make the offense better, right? That's just how the Yankees do it. And so if Volpe is hitting at the top of that lineup, he's going to score a ton of runs. So those are things you can count on with him. I'm super excited for him to come up. He's from New Jersey. He's got exposure to that market. I don't think it's too big for him. Super fun player. Like I said, he's my number 2. And I think the biggest reason why I have him over a player like Walker or even a player like Marte is the fact that he has not elite speed, but elite stolen base potential. He does have a little bit of swing and miss, 118 strikeouts and 511 at-bats last year. He definitely has, some of that, like I talked about, some of that Marcus Semien try to kind of elevate the ball out in front of the plate and hit it down the left field line. He's got some of that in his game too, but he's, to me, his ceiling is unlimited. If he hit 32 home runs and had 50 steals, would you be shocked? Probably not. So Volpe is also my number 2, and we'll finish up with our number 1 prospect, Corbin Carroll, outfielder, Arizona Diamondbacks. I know we both have him as our number 1. You roster him in our home league. What is it about Carroll that makes him your top prospect?
Yes, so just the speed and power combination, little spark plug at 5'10". He initially came up, I drafted him in 2021. He initially came up as a high hit outfielder, right? And I still see that just because he stood out. He was out an entire year with a shoulder, right? The weak spot is there is some swing and miss, right? And there's even some zone contact issues with him. But you're still at 72% contact rate, 15% walk rate, so great eye. And I could see the contact rate going up as he gets used to MLB pitching. I think he has a swing to adjust to that. Forecaster has him 40% above in power, 57% in speed above league average as far as forecasting the next year, which is incredible. for that's a 30-30 type of player. I'm not sure he could hit 30 home runs. I see him more in the 25 average range, but I could easily see him over 30 steals. He's what's incredible is, so Baseball America just came out with Arizona today. They had him at 60, 60, 80. So they gave him 80 speed, which is and if you saw him last year, that was quite evident. I
Wow.
think Arizona was really conservative with him last year on the bases. I watched most of his games. I think they're saving him up for this year. They didn't want to see him get hurt. He had that shoulder was used quite a bit last year. That was out of joint the whole year before. So but I can see him taking off on bases. That's also going to help as far as with the hit, if he starts to make contact, even if he has weak contact over a swing and miss, he'll get on base more because of that as well. So yeah, I don't see he's not uber elite like Churio could be or De La Cruz, but he has that high he has a high floor and a high ceiling.
100 speed in Savant. So yeah, he was in the top 1% of speed for major league players last year. I agree with all of it. I do think there is peak 30-30 potential. His speed and his hit tool are going to keep him as a high average player as well. He does take walks. The one worry is, as you alluded to, his zone contact. And that's kind of been the knock on that people have brought up ever since he was a high kind of rising prospect. His zone contact in 115 plate appearances in Arizona last year was 81.9%. Average league average for outfielders last year was 85.4%. So it was about 3.5 percentage points lower than league average. That said, he's got dynamite in his bat and is a very skilled player. He's a really fun player to watch, especially on the base paths. The reason I have Carroll and Volpe above players that I think might have even more potential is the fact that they are power speed with average to above average hit tool. And that to me is a bigger, philosophically, is what I look for in a dynasty prospect, right? It's I need all of those skills, not just the one skill. Even if the one skill is better than those top two prospects. So for me, Carroll is 1 and Volpe is 2. I also believe Carroll is also part Asian American.
Yes,
So the top
mom
two,
is Japanese. Is that correct?
I think so. So the top 2 prospects in Dynasty are both Asian American, which I think is super, super cool. One other note about Carroll is he's from the Seattle area and went to Lakeside High School, same high school as Paul Allen and Bill Gates, which is kind of funny as well. That concludes our top 100 dynasty prospects. This was a labor of love, both creating the list and trying to figure out how to get the actual podcast done. I would like to come back in the upcoming weeks with our positional rankings for these prospects, and then a review of our top 100. Anything else you want to bring up? Any prospects that you have shooting up the board for you that we want to convey?
I think we have just about everything covered for now, but we'll have a lot to talk about. I'm looking forward to the deeper dives in the position ranks, because they really force you to go look at players that really aren't seen yet.
I was surprised Harry Ford wasn't in your top 5.
Yeah, I traded an update there. I traded Alvarez so I could keep Ford. Yeah, there is the local Seattle element as well. It's always fun to have a Seattle player that you're investing in.
Right. Well, awesome, man. I appreciate it. We'll
enjoyed it.
And let's keep talking about spring training, because it's going to be
phenomenal.
I love it. All right, brother.
Take it easy.
You too.